Hello everyone, my name is Jeanette and welcome to the diary of my adventures in knitwear design. This is episode number 1. I have already done an introduction video to this series about how I got into knitwear design, so if you'd like to hear more about that, I welcome you to watch the previous recording. In this episode I'll talk about my first published pattern. It's the sweater that I am wearing. My most recently published pattern, the things that I have currently in test knitting, and the pattern that I'm working on, as well as some other whips and plans. So my first ever published pattern was a sweater called Not a Boring Sweater. The name wasn't given just because it doesn't look boring. It was also anything but boring to knit. And I just named it the first thing that came to mind when I was asked for a name. So initially the yarn that I chose for this project was something that I had started 8 years ago, I think. I had almost finished one side of something, and I realized that I won't have enough yarn to finish the whole thing, so I just put it aside thinking that I'll figure out what to do later. And 8 or 9 years had passed, and I was just cleaning my sort of stash, and I came across this project last year. And I had no idea what I was trying to do or where I had stopped, so I just ripped it apart, washed the yarn, and wound it up in nice yarn balls to create a sweater with cables. When I started this design, I wasn't thinking about writing a pattern yet, or about grading, or about how I will write the instructions. I was just knitting in my usual way, cast on and try and see how it goes. So when it came to the actual pattern writing, I was kind of caught off guard, not knowing where to start. And from my product management experience, I knew that I should just do the minimum viable pattern, minimum viable product with that before I start adding any bells and whistles in. And so I went on competitor research. I bought some patterns that were similar to see how the instructions are written, not with the purpose of knitting them, but purely reading through them and seeing how other designers have instructed in their patterns. The first thing I realized is that I will need nice photographs, and I am not good with photographs at that time. And luckily my sister and my dad are both photographers. It's just that they live in a completely different country from me, so I mailed the sweater to my sister, and I kindly asked her to help out. And obviously she did a great job. I also understood the main elements that go into a pattern. There was always some blah blah at the start about what it is and the inspiration, and I knew right away that for me that will be the hardest thing to write in a pattern, because the rest were quite straightforward. It have a nice structure, and so there's some abbreviation section and stitches section and the instructions and schematics and charts. So yeah, I liked all the structured pieces. I just wanted to make the minimum needed to sort of see the process of publishing a pattern, what it feels like, what's involved, without going all out. I knew from the start that I definitely want to use a tech editor, because I gathered that the first pattern sort of sets the mood for the rest of your knitwear design career. It keeps living in Ravelry forever, and at any time anyone can download it, and that will be their impression of you as a designer. So I needed the help in that regard. But what I did kind of cut off is I skipped the grading or translating to many different sizes. I thought that one size is still a pattern. It will show me all the things about pattern writing, and I can sort of add that later. So I could skip the grading, and also I didn't need to involve test knitters, because I had already made the size and I was happy with the fit. Created the first version, and there were some things that I got really lucky with, and some mistakes that I made. So I got really lucky with my tech editor. I honestly picked the first one I found on Google search, which looked sort of professional enough, judging by the website and their service description. I think that's, and I didn't want to spend more time on trying to evaluate a range of options in a sort of in a thing I knew nothing about. I didn't have any criteria to evaluate editors. And so I just thought, okay, let's try and see how this works. And she was just amazing. Her attention to detail is second to none, and still to this day, whenever I get to test knit her reviews or edits, I basically never get any questions about the pattern from testers, and people say there are no mistakes and everyone's quite happy. So yeah, I was very lucky, because since then I have learned obviously that there's also a range of capabilities in that profession. Another thing that I got lucky was the actual design. It's quite attention grabbing. I mean, I'm not sure if it's luck, because I did put quite a bit of work into designing the yoke, but still to this day, this is my most favorited design on Ravelry. And the third, of course, is that I was very lucky to have photographers in my family for the pattern and for helping me with my future photography endeavors. So the things that I would have definitely done differently if I had a chance to redo it all over again was going with one size. Especially going with my size. My size is it was quite limiting, because I made an online form at the time of publishing, asking for people to register their interest if they actually liked the design, and it was worth for me to go and grade it up to more designs. And so I asked them to add their email address and select which size they were interested in making. And as a result, I got 60 responses. And you can see that S size, which was the size that I had initially launched, is by almost the least popular. So yeah, I kind of explains what happened after. Another mistake I did was I added it to the Ravelry database way too soon. I had read somewhere in the instructions that the Ravelry admins, I guess, will need to approve the pattern before it's published in the database. So I assumed it might take a few days, and I got really what's the word? I jumped the gun and I added it to Ravelry before I had the final PDF ready. And hell, yeah, there were so many views that the pattern page got simply because it was a recently added pattern, and no one could purchase it. And I think, yeah, I probably lost quite a bit of sales in those days. But it was a very, very great lesson to learn. And the third, don't know if it's a mistake, but it's definitely something that I would probably put some more thought into, was the marketing side. I didn't know much about it. I didn't know what to do. I had like zero connections in the industry, and maybe 200 followers on Instagram at the time. Yeah, I mean, I still don't know what I would have done differently, but I think I should have researched a bit more of how to get in front of people, because I had 2 sales and it went completely quiet. It was quite discouraging, but thankfully my husband is like the most amazing person in the world, and he said, he told me to forget about any kind of accounting for the first 2 years and just do it because I love to do it, and think of it as an investment in the future. The lack of sales shouldn't take away from my pride of having done something completely new. So that was definitely something I needed to hear. Also, the response rate of the interest form that I had added with the pattern was promising. So I proceeded on to grading it into 8 sizes and test knitting. And I made another version, so this blue version, and I filmed every single cable stitch used whenever it's introduced. So almost like a row by row instructions, and added those videos annotated with the stitch names, and added those on YouTube, so that also a complete beginner cable wise would be able to do this. And I'm not using a cable needle, so you can move quite quickly around. And I got really great feedback from testers. That was also very encouraging. I fell in love with the test knitting process. It's amazing to see your design being created in different parts of the world by different people. It makes my heart melt every time someone tags me on Instagram or adds their project on Ravelry, and I don't always know what to say, but you should know I am deeply touched by everyone who chooses to make one of my designs. Eventually, the all-size version was released last October, and to this day, it is the biggest hit of my designs. There's also a couple of stories related to this sweater. Not long before Christmas, I received a letter on Ravelry. A message on Ravelry, from a girl in the States, I believe. And she opened by saying that she's only 13 years old and does not have a credit card, but she lives with her mom and 7 sisters or 7 siblings, and she helps out her mom as much as she can, and she would like to make this sweater for her mom if I would consider gifting her the pattern. And I was very moved by this story, and obviously I'm in a position where I can to be in the position to give someone a bit of happiness, a knitting happiness of this sort. Of course, I said yes. And another one was a very pleasant surprise. Podcaster Dundernit organized a knit-along called the Blame Dunder Knit-along that was running from November till the end of January, I believe. And it was for anyone to participate with any sort of craft project that their heart had desired to make, or the yarn they wanted to work with for a while, but for some reason they hadn't allowed themselves to. And so that as part of this knit along, they could feel free to cast on and make it. And if anyone asked any questions, the answer would be blamed underknit. So I participated in this with another project of mine that I might talk about in some of the future episodes. It was a white jumper with 20 different stitch patterns. And in one of her episodes, she was showcasing the finished objects, and mine was included in that episode. So I was watching it, and I was patiently waiting for my chance to my sweater to come up. What came up a couple of shots before mine was someone I wasn't even aware of. They had chosen my Not a Boring Sweater as their project for Plain Dunder Knit Along. Yeah, that was something else. My most recently published pattern is a stroller blanket for babies. I do not have the sample with me anymore because I created it as a gift for my sister's baby. She announced they were expecting last year, and from experience, I immediately, of course, wanted to make something for the baby, and I knew that the babies grow out of cardigans, sweaters, and jumpsuits quite quickly. So I wanted something more long-lasting and practical, and blankie was the thing that I was using with my son almost every day. So hence I picked this as the project. And my sister helped me choose the yarn, and she mentioned that she'd like some cables in it. And if you haven't already picked this up, then I am all about cables, and I do not need to be told twice. Cables it is. One thing that I wanted this blankie to have is it should scream love. And I think the easiest way to demonstrate that would be to include something heart-shaped. So there was quite a number of attempts of me trying to draw hearts with cables, but I didn't get to the look that would please me. I tried a few other ways with lace knitting, And none of that was good enough either, because I needed a bit more texture, and Latvia, where my sister lives, is a cold country, so it shouldn't be something too light. Sometime around the same time, I had accidentally come across of how to do bubbles with a crochet needle. And looking at how firm and nice they are compared to the knitted ones, I knew that at some point I wanted to try and use them in one of my designs, and these two things met. So in my mind, I realized that I could draw things with bubbles. So I made a heart-shaped bubble arrangement, and knew that I was onto something. And tried a few cabley things around them, and I sort of was happy to begin the design. But it's a blanket. It's quite sizable, and I knew that if it was just straight repetition of the same thing over and over again, I would get bored really quickly, and probably would some other knitters too. So I decided to, what is the good word for this? Make them run up in a diagonal. So knitting from the corner in bias. And I came up with a construction that makes up the blankie from 4 equal sized triangles. So you work a triangle, then you add another one, and you've made a full sort of circle, and it's the finished seamless cardigan. Blankie is ready. After finishing the first triangle, I realized that it's way too busy, and it actually is hard to make out the hearts. There's too much going on, but because of the construction, I could easily correct the mistake and provide some relief with the second triangle by making it a lot simpler. And yeah, it's mostly just purl with a few cable-like things running across it. And then I repeated the first and the second triangle, coming up to the full blankie. And I finished the sample in July 2019. Then it came the pattern writing, and I just could not, for the longest time, figure out how I could put this on a piece of paper in a digestible way. I had drawn a chart that was 160 rows and about 90 stitches wide, and it would not physically fit on one page. And the chart wasn't enough. I needed textual instructions. And chart was necessary because as I am doing increases on the right side of the triangle, and I'm needing to work them into the stitch pattern. It's never the same, almost never the same increase stitch. Sometimes I'm hiding them in the cable. So something different is happening on almost every row. So yeah, I kept pondering about the best ways to do this for about 2-3 months, until finally at the end of September I was sort of almost happy with the direction that it was going, and I asked for my tech editor's help on getting it across the line. And it was on about 26 pages. I was looking like a real beast. I was looking for suggestions to cut it down, and we did manage to get it down to 20 pages or 21 pages. But still, there's quite some volume of things to tech edit. So that also took a while. And I could finally start the test knitting for this in November. And I got 3 beautiful test knits out of this. The pattern is finally available on Ravelry, and I'm so glad. Even though it took 7 months or more to get it there, the piece looks quite impressive, but the way the instructions are written means that it's quite easy to follow. Even a beginner knitter could take on this as a project. The pattern was well received on the publication day. I got as high as top 10 in the Ravelry's Hot Right Now category. So that is basically how I judge the success of my design. And I mean, even if it's for a day, it's really nice to be displayed along famous designers like Stephen West or Andrea Maury and so on. Yeah, we get our day of fame. Talking about mistakes I made for this with this design is yeah, it should definitely not be someone's second or third pattern. I actually got a bit traumatized from writing the pattern, that for the next few designs I really kept it ultra simple, and I as soon as I realized that my idea might be tricky to write down, I would just throw it out the bin, and it won't be included in the design. So yeah, I'm kind of getting back to my texture heavy and cable heavy designing slowly, because there's of course always a way to write it down. But yeah, that was quite traumatic, where I got lucky. Again, my tech editor was just immensely helpful. Without her, it would not have gotten to the test knitters. I wouldn't have had the confidence to trust anyone else with this. Again, I don't know if it's luck, because I did put effort in, but filming and preparing the videos and drawing out each section in charts meant that it looks impressive. When the finished object looks impressive, but it's very easy to follow and anyone can do it. And again, the design is eye-catching, and I have received really nice feedback from and reactions on the photos on social media. A pattern that I currently have in testing is called My First Cardi. It is a collaboration project with a Latvian knitting diary / planner product. In the pattern will be included as a bonus in this knitting diary, and it is to support an organization called Sirdssiltuma darbnīca, which means heart warmth workshop. It's a workshop for warming hearts. They work with the hospitals in Latvia and organize donations of knitwear and other clothes for prematurely born babies. I made this cardigan in 7 sizes, so from preemie all the way up to a 2-year-old, and it's a raglan cardigan from the bottom up, and seamless, and ended with a button band. This is probably one of the most like Murphy Law use case or scenario full project that I have made. I have no idea why everything that could go wrong went wrong with this, but it was about 6 or 7 massive errors which made me recreate this in 5 sample versions. So the first one I started and it was all gray. It was in this color, and I asked for some feedback on about and things to note when you're creating clothes for prematurely born babies. And the first feedback was obviously it has to be quite loose, and so that it's easy to put on. The babies are fragile, and the last thing you want is to struggle to put the clothes on, and that it should be nothing with, what's the word, feathery, like mohair is out of the question, or there should be no bubbles or holes, things that could get caught on the wires in the NICU, etc., etc. And then another one was choose the colors to be joyful and happy, because everything else is gloom and doom. And so, yeah, my color choice was a gray one. I found some yarn in my stash. So, yeah, I reset that, and I went and got some red and yellow and restarted it. Created the first version. I realized that I had made the sleeves way too long because I forgot to exclude the ease bit from anyway, details. This was wrong. So I had already made the whole thing, and then I looked at it and the proportions were wrong, and then I went to look for the error. I should probably mention that I was supposed to get this done in basically a week's time. So my initial decisions were nearly cutting all the corners. Like, I would have never picked a bottom-up raglan design if I had known that I will spend a whole month on it. I would have said top down all the way. It's the easiest to knit, the easiest one to try on as you go, or regulate the length of the sleeves and body. But bottom up is easier to design, and I had little time, so I went with that. Right, okay, this version, wrong. I started the next version, and I created it because I had actually ordered a doll online to try things on. Here's my model. I did a little bit of research about the sizes, as I haven't had personal experience with prematurely born babies or small babies, and yeah, I don't know if anyone would actually let me try things on. Doll is the closest thing I could think of, but this one is quite, let's say, looks well fed. So I didn't notice until way later that this model that I had made was, the ease was way too much. It would, yeah, it's just too wide all around. And also it was made in DK yarn, and personally I thought it was a little bit too thick. So this second version, I had already started the test. People, but I because of too much ease and because of poor yarn weight choice, I apologized to everyone and I said, I need to stop this. I need to make it with less ease and in fingering weight yarn. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. So I translated, or I regraded the cardigan for smaller ease and fingering weight, and also almost finished it. That I realized that I really do not like the shape of this neckline. Something had gone wrong in my translation. At this point, I had already restarted the test with caution that the instructions might change. So yeah, I emailed out again saying, sorry, the neckline is not done yet. I need to rework this cardigan for the 4th time. And finally, I was happy with this version. This is the 4th version. This is in fingering weight, and I'm happy how this went. However, due to everything that had gone wrong with it, I still needed to make sure that all the sizes are still looking as good. So I also wanted to create the biggest size just to see how it scales, and I made a version for my son. You can see the leftover yarn from my Not a Boring Sweater, and I still got to weave in the ends and the sleeves, but I am very happy with how this turned out. And the test is going until the end of February. There are still some spots left if you're interested in making a fingering weight cardigan for a newborn. The model is, or the design is quite unisex. The patterns that I'm working on currently is actually one it's a cardigan, a V-neck cardigan with gable panels. It was a present for my sister for Christmas, so I have already gifted the sample. I was 2 months late because it has a couple of elements that took a deceivingly long time to knit. I will probably talk a bit more about this in my next episode, when I hope I will have made some progress on the pattern front. And another whip I've got on my needles at the moment is a simple first ever triangle shawl knitted from the corner, and it's complete freestyle. I am not even writing anything down. This happened as an accident. I wasn't planning on knitting a shawl, but last Saturday I went on a knitting meetup called Socks on the Beach in Eastbourne, UK. And just the day before, I had finished all my whips had turned into finished objects, and I didn't have anything to knit. I didn't want to start creating a new design, as that requires making a number of swatches and concentrating on focusing on calculations, etc. But so I needed something that I can freely talk to people as I do, and I had been given this color is really beautiful, but it just clashes so much with this sweater that I'm wearing that it's hard to show off in a nice light. I had been given this yarn at the Waltham Abbey Wool Show, where I went a couple of weeks ago, It's a new base by Sheep on Mars. It's a non-superwash merino and silk mix, and it's really nice. It's really light and knits up really. It looks quite woolly, but it's very soft. And I only have about 100 grams of it, so it's not sweater quantity. But I believe I'll have enough for a shawl. So I chose a construction that sort of fits in its end proportions. Sides already fit in the proportions very early on, so I can stop knitting it whenever I run out of yarn, and it will look okay. It won't look like some corner is missing or anything. And I started with 3 stitches, and every next row, I made some increases and decreases, but every next row was designed as I went along. So there was no sketching, no swatching. This is one giant swatch. I am not sure if I will write a pattern for it. It's full of texture, and it looks quite simple at the moment. But again, as per my blanket design, as I was knitting and I'm making increases, I had to make a decision of how to incorporate and integrate the increase into the stitch pattern that was present at the time. So extensive charting again would be necessary, and it might take longer again to create the pattern than to finish this shawl. So I will see what it looks like when it's done. If it is something spectacular or special, then perhaps I will bother with the pattern. Otherwise, it's just something I am working on when I need some mindless, or let's say social knitting. Other things that I'm working on at the moment are things that I will submit as design proposals for publications, and so I will not show them here, but I am still at the stage where the only way I can convey a design idea is by actually knitting up the sample, almost all of it, instead of drawing, because my drawing is just meh. So yeah, when I know the results of those, what are they? Submission calls, then I can talk about the designs in more detail, as a couple of them I definitely want to release as patterns one way or another. So yeah, I'm frantically knitting up the sample to take photos and submit, and the deadline for Pom Pom is next Tuesday, and then there's a couple of other ones that I will try my hand. And fingers crossed. I am also going to Unravel Festival in Farnham, UK next Friday to do some serious shopping. I will tell you all about it next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.